Hello everyone and welcome. Today we are playing another game of Commander. We have Blights playing Coma, the Cosmos Serpent, who is a big creature stompy deck. We have myself, who's playing Arcade the Strategist, which is a Walls tribal deck. We have Bodhi, which is playing Atraxa, which is a Super Friends deck. And Sunny, who is playing Anowon, which is another Rogues tribal deck. So without further ado, let's get into it. Starting us off with Blights, placing an island for turn, and then passes to Bodhi, who puts down a Flooded Strand. He then taps and sacrifices it to go get a Breeding Pool into play tapped. Sunny draws for turn, plays out an island, and passes. I draw, play a Hallowed Fountain tapped, and then pass back to Blights. Blights draws, places a Simic Growth Train tapped, bouncing the island to his hand, and then passes. Bodhi finishes shuffling, draws for turn. This time he plays another fetch land, tap and sacrificing it to bring out a Zargoth Triome. Sunny will draw, play a Swamp and Demir Signet for turn. I will draw, play a Forest, and then a Sunscape Familiar, and pass. Blights will draw, put down the island that he originally bounced, plays the Sword of the Anime, and goes over to Bodhi. Bodhi thinks about his hand a little bit before playing a Command Tower. He then taps for 3, playing a Replicating Ring, and then passes. Sunny untaps and draws, placing down a Swamp. Thinks about his hand a little bit and evaluates the field before placing a Renkle, Master of Pranks. Takes a bit of time considering who to attack before going it to be, saying that he's scared because I have lands this game. We'll lose 1 life and draw a card. He passes the turn. I untap, upkeep and draw, before placing down an island, tapping out to play Arcades thanks to the reduced cost from the Sunscape Familiar. Then get my revenge back on Sunny, attacking him with 3 and passing the turn. Blights draws, puts down another island and plays Toski, Bearer of Secrets, hoping to draw some cards. He then passes to Bodhi. Bodhi plays a Exotic Orchard, forgetting about his Replicating Ring trigger on his upkeep, so he plays it out. He then taps out to play Atraxa, and then at the end of his turn he proliferates and passes to Sunny. Sunny asks what the CMC of the all creatures are on board are. He then decides to throw down a Swamp before kicking a Blood Chief's Thirst to kill Atraxa. Atraxa dies. And Sunny sends Renkle towards Bodhi. Picking again the mode for everyone to lose a life and draw a card. I untap, Looking at Blight's Toski and getting a little bit jealous, I decide that I want one for myself. So I tap for 3 and play a Wall of Lost Omens to tap down Blight's Toski and have Wall of Lost Omens become a copy of it. I draw a card from our keys and then move to combat. Attacking Blights with Archaeus and the Sunscape Familiar. And then drawing 2 cards off my Toski. Sunny is now going to find a Wall of Lost Omens for himself to put in one of his own decks for later on, after he marbles at its power. I then pass the turn. Blights untaps, upkeeps and draws. However, he's having a little bit of trouble with lands, so he plays Throne of the Godpharaoh, making us all lose life equal to the amount of creatures he owns at the beginning of his end step. He passes the turn, pings everyone for 1, and it's Birdie's turn. Birdie untaps. Places down a Godless Shrine, shocking it in. Thinks about his hand for a little bit. Before placing a Bloom Tender to the battlefield. And a Flux Channeler. He passes the turn. And then on Sunny's upkeep, Bodhi will play a Mystical Tutor, giving him a Proliferate trigger from the Flux Channeler, and will allow him to search for a card. Sunny will then play a Fatal Push, killing the Bloom Tender, as to reduce Bodhi from getting too much mana. Sunny plays a Swamp for turn. Before thinking about his hand a bit and deciding to play Anowon. He moves to combat, swinging Rankle at Bodhi to mill Bodhi's top 4 cards as well as give him the damage. He does not hit any creatures, so he does not draw. He chooses the mode for Rankle to make everyone lose a life and draw a card after damage. Then he passes to me. I untap upkeep and draw. Before placing a Sun Petal Grove for turn. And then tap 4 mana for a Kerametra, God of Harvests, making so that whenever a creature enters the battlefield under my control, I get to search for a land. I then play a Perimeter Captain, going to get a land, and drawing from Archaes. I then move to combat, swinging both the Sunscape Familiar and the Wall of Lost Omens at Blights, and Archaes will go towards Bodhi. I then shuffle my library, draw my card, and pass the turn. Blights, who is still having trouble with lands, taps his mana to play a Omen of the Hunt, going to get a forest onto the battlefield tapped. He then passes, discards, and we all lose 1 life. Bodhi ticks up his replicating ring, as he has forgotten to for the last couple of times. Bodhi then casts Atraxa for the 2nd time, in order to proliferate the replicating ring at the end of his turn. He then passes to Sunny. Sunny untaps, upkeeps, and draws. He plays a swamp, and I try to make a deal with him so that he will deal with the Atraxa, and then I will deal with the replicating ring, as it currently has 5 counters on it. He plays a Trident Shorestocker, plays Cast Down in order to kill the Flux Channeler, he then sends Rankle at Blights, making him mill 4, and Blights actually mills a creature, which allows Sunny to draw a card. He then chooses the mode that everybody loses a life, draws a card, and each player sacrifices a creature. Blight sacrifices Toski, Bodhi sacrifices Atraxa, Sunny sacrifices his new Trident Shorebringer, and I sacrifice my Perimeter Captain. Sunny then casts the Changeling Outcast and passes the turn. I untap and draw. I untap, draw, and place my land for turn. I then keep to my end of the bargain and play a Nature's Claim onto the replicating ring to destroy it. And Bodhi gains 4 life from that. I fiddled with my mana a bit, thinking about how I can cast everything. before playing a overgrown battlement for turn, which I will then draw a card off our keys and get a forest. And then tap 1 to play an assault formation, making all my creatures assign combat damage equal to their toughness. And then move to combat, sending our keys towards Sunny, my not Toski, and my Sunscape Familiar to Blights, and Karametra to Bodhi. Sunny then Brazen borrows our keys, which will actually turn off Karametra. I will have 2 creatures deal combat damage, and then draw 2 cards. We try and work out life totals as they ask whether or not the creatures of defender do no damage or not, and if Karametra is still a creature. With that, I draw my cards and pass the turn. Blights untaps, upkeeps, and draws. Bodhi calls for a card count, as I show my 7. Blights brainstorms and tries to hit his bland drop, but misses. Just remember that I have to shuffle my deck after getting my forest out from it. Blights taps his mana for playing a Champion of Lampolt, and then passes the turn. Bodhi will tap 3 mana to play a Toxic Deluge for 4. Whereas that would cripple me, so I play a Teferi's Protection to blink out. All the creatures on the battlefield die, except mine. Bodhi taps 1 to play a Birds of Paradise, and then passes the turn. Sunny untaps and draws. He plays an Arcane Signet. Counts the cards in his graveyard before exiling most of his whole graveyard in order to Treasure Cruise to draw 3 cards. He then plays an island for turn, for tapping 1, and plays a Merfolk Wind Robber, and then passes. I blink back in and untap, draw for turn, Play my forest for turn. For tapping a blue for Tetsugo, making all my walls unblockable. And tap for 3 to play Arceus again. I then play a Asceticism, giving all my creatures hexproof. I fetch my lands for Karametra and then move to combat. I will then send my 2 walls at Sunny, Karametra to Blight, Sunny then flashes in the Brazen Borrower for next turn, and I pass. Bodhi's getting a little bit fearful of my board, as Blight untaps, upkeeps, and then draws for turn. As Sunny asks for a graveyard count. Blight taps out to play a Paradox Zone, and then passes the turn to make a Fractal. Bodhi untaps, upkeeps and draws. Bodhi taps 3 to play a Dakon. He's then going to immediately tick it down to exile my Karametra, God of Harvests. With that, he then passes the turn. Sunny untaps, upkeeps and draws before moving into combat and sending both his creatures at Bodhi's Dakon. He then sacrifices the Merfolk Windrobber to draw a card. Taps for 4 to play a Damnation to destroy all creatures on the board. I tap 1 green thanks to the reduced cost of my Sunscape Familiar and Heroic Intervention to give all my stuff indestructible and hexproof again. Sunny then places Siphon Insight. However, he has some issues and then disconnects. My Heroic Intervention will then just fizzle as I have my turn. I untap, upkeep and draw before placing a Wall of Blossoms followed by an Axe-Blade Guardian, drawing from our keys, a Hover Barrier, drawing from our keys, and then I play a Soul Herder. Moving to combat, I attack Bodhi and Dakon with everything, drawing 3 from my toss key. I then pass the turn to Blights. Blights untaps, missing another land drop, but this time he will tap out to play a Primal Vigor to double his counters and his tokens. Then moves to his end step, giving him 8 counters on his Paradox Zone, and then he creates 2 16/16 fractals, which is pretty impressive. Bodhi tries to figure out why he's getting such big creatures before realizing it is from Primal Vigor. Bodhi untaps, upkeeps and draws for turn. Bodhi will tap 3 to play Solve the Equation, allowing him to fetch an instant or sorcery from his deck, put it into his hand. To go get a Cyclonic Rift. He will then cast it. However, now that I think about it, my stuff had hexproof, so he wouldn't be able to target anything. However, I then cast an Eerie Interlude to blink most of my board and draw a heap of cards from our keys. His Cyclonic Rift will then fizzle. He then passes, moves to my turn. I untap with my ridiculous board as I do some math. I unfortunately have enough to kill one player, but not both. So I will send just enough to kill Bodhi and hold back the rest for the following turn. I cast a Wall of Denial and a Wall of Blossoms, drawing from our keys, and then cast a third wall, again drawing from our keys. Tap for 4 to play a Panharmonicon. Now I will play a Tenyo Shield Mage, tick him down to create a wall, and drawing 2 cards from the Panharmonicon now. Blight asked me to organise the field as there is a lot going on. And at the end of my turn, I blink Wall of Blossoms with the Soul. Then get to draw 6 cards from it, 2 from itself, 2 from my keys, and then 2 more. Blights will then play a Parallel Lives. After finally drawing a land. However, I counter it with a Fierce Guardianship. He moves to his end step, making 2 64/64 fractals. However, it's a little bit too late, as on my upkeep I will overload a Cyclonic Rift, bouncing his entire field, and take the win. Anyway, thank you very much for joining me on this, and I hope to see you again in